Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. I'm Phil Chetwynd. I'm the Global News Director of AFP. And I don't need to introduce Maria, but I will, because I think everybody knows who she is, but I will introduce her nonetheless, because she deserves an introduction. Nobel Prize winner for journalism.
It's yours. It's really, it shows how much we've suffered.
Amazing. With Dmitry Muratov in 2021 for efforts to safeguard free expression. You know, a great source of pride for the journalism industry and an amazing voice for us. The founder and CEO of Rappler in the Philippines, which is an amazing audience-first media, always ahead of the curve. And we'll come back to that in our discussion, Maria. And through Rappler, Maria tangled with President Rodrigo Duterte during his so-called drug war, which led to multiple legal suits, tax evasion, libel. I think at one point, Maria, it's fair to say you were facing 100 years in jail, I think?
More than. 103, to be accurate.
Right. And she's now an indefatigable campaigner for journalism and everything around facts. And we'll talk a lot about facts. Just come from Georgia, before that in Cannes. You know, incredibly strong, authentic, heroic voice for all of us. So we're really delighted to have her with us here today. Thanks, Maria.
No, thanks for having me.
So, I mean, I guess I was going to start by just saying, how are you? I mean, you're out on bail.
Yes. Things can get better. So first of all, please, we were walking over here and I was just saying, I wanted you to know what you do, right? It sounds really mundane to say you're a fact checker. But in a world of exponential lies, you literally are the first line of defense for everyone. And I think what we will find out is that this moment in time, when we look back, we are going to look at this as the moment of either the beginning of victory or the beginning of the end. And that's, so how am I? I'm chasing my shadow. I decided I'm not going to sleep all of 2024 until, you know what that's like, until the end, until we know, because 2024 is the tipping point year for democracy globally. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically, so it is choice. And part of that is because of the way we consume news, the way we get facts. So, sorry, I'll go to my cases. Things can get better. This is the best part, right? Under Duterte, where our first casualty in the battle for facts was exactly how many people have died in this 6-year brutal drug war. If you talk to the police, they can say as little as 2,000, but as of December 2018, our Commission on Human Rights said nearly 30,000. 2018, right? It's 2024. And anyway, so from Duterte to Marcos, we had an elections in May 2022 where fact checkers were out in force, and we literally built a 4-layer pyramid with our partners. Some of you are here. And guess what? We moved from hell to purgatory. It's not perfect yet, because nothing is perfect. But my cases, from a high of 11 criminal charges, criminal cases that were ongoing at the same time, which meant I spent more time with lawyers than journalists, to 2. There are 2 left, and one of them can still shut down Rappler, but the other one, yeah, I can go to jail for 7 years. But you know what? 7 years to 103 years.
103, right?
Right? So things can get better.
Maria, I want to sort of think how we got here.
Sure.
I was saying to Maria yesterday, I first met Maria in 2013, I think, and I went down to visit her offices in Manila. And just founded Rappler at this time, you know, incredible optimism of how to harness social media for storytelling. and great journalism. You know, and I remember going back to my team and going, oh, I've seen the future. And so we have to remember that, don't we? That there was, before we got here, there was a moment of optimism there. So what happened? What was your journey there? What happened?
We drank the Kool-Aid, right? We at Rappler. I mean, I came from managing the largest news organization in the Philippines, which has now lost its franchise to operate. So it's part of the regression of democracy. From running 1,000 journalist news organizations to starting with 12 people. It was both a shock and extremely invigorating. At that time, in 2012, I saw Facebook, I saw YouTube wasn't really a factor then, but it was Facebook and Twitter as enablers of democracy, as empowering platforms. But what happened? The business model shifted. Sheryl Sandberg joined Facebook and commoditized the people and the content. So we watched news when the incentive structure of the distribution platforms, and this is where you've heard me say this a lot, but please look at the structure of the technology that connects us by design. As early as 2018, so you're talking 2013. In 2013, we were using Twitter for disaster risk reduction, right? We built a tech platform for something called Project Agos, where our civic engagement arm was working with the Office of Civil Defense, and all the news groups were using the same hashtag, because the Philippines gets an average of 20 typhoons every year. And in real time, for real people, the geotagging of Twitter helped rescue people, right? Helped save lives. But that was before all the crap came in. And when did that happen? By 2018, MIT had a study that said lies spread 6 times faster on social media. Right? They figured out through A/B testing that you can keep people scrolling longer if you feed them lies, and then if you incite fear, anger, and hate. This is data we found in the Philippines in 2017. If you push fear, anger, and hate, i.e. the worst of humanity, then it spreads even faster. That's the outrage economy that we are all living in today. I've gone as far as calling it, it is pumping toxic sludge directly into our nervous system. And there is the work you do, that we do at Rappler. Oh, that fact check. People will tell you, it doesn't matter if you fact check because people don't care. But guess what? You are the only anchor. Facts are the only anchor in our shared reality. And that's what's happened since 2018. It's gotten even worse because, and we've seen this, right? In 2016, I was in Mountain View, and I was telling the people there, journalists at that point, that what is happening to us in the Philippines, where I was getting an average of 90 hate messages per hour. I'd never lived through anything like this. And I said, what's happening to us? It's coming for you. Because these are global platforms. We just happen to be the petri dish right now. But Slovakia in Europe is the petri dish. Georgia is a petri dish, right? What's the petri dish? Anywhere where you have a significant social media penetration rate. You saw Canada go from 37% to 85% social media penetration rate, and that's when things changed. You can almost track the rise of the lies to that. But sorry, let me finish. So where are we today?
Yeah, that's what I was going to come to, because I was going to come to today. If I track your my Maria tracker, the way you frame what's now, it's pretty dystopian, right? It's a pretty. I think that several phrases that always stick out, which I think are worth repeating. We're standing on the rubble of the world that was.
Yep.
And that an atom bomb has exploded in the information ecosystem. Yeah. Can you unpack those two phrases? Because that's where we are in your mind at this point, right?
Yeah. So the atom bomb silently exploding in our information ecosystem. I think I said that in 2021 at the Nobel lecture, right? And guess what? It got worse. So how can it get even worse? You're not going to walk out depressed, because we all have to be energized, because the battle is now, right? And it is a battle for facts, which means you really are important. Why do I say that? Especially post-COVID, right? Even before COVID, what we saw was that because lies spread faster, literally, you know the Stranger Things, that Netflix series where they have to go into the upside down. The world is upside down, and it's literally called the upside down. And the upside down kind of looks like our world, except that it's gooey and slimy and yucky, and it's full of monsters. I think that's the world we live in today. And what do I mean by this atom bomb exploding? The power structures are completely different. You're seeing it play out. News journalists will know this. Phil, we saw Putin visit North Korea twice. We saw Modi. I mean, let's just talk about the way the world is shifting geopolitically that is directly connected to the vote, right? VDEM in Sweden said that as of January this year, 71% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. 71%. And the tipping point this year, why? Because half the world is going to vote. You don't have to worry about the machines, the infrastructure only, which is what, say, the United States, that's what CISA does. But you have to worry about the people who are going to vote, because social media has become a behavior modification system where if you pound a lie 1,000,000 times, it becomes a fact. You cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction. And that's before generative AI. So the atom bomb exploding, let's start with, I actually told this to the Pope. Isn't it against the 10 Commandments for people to lie? And yet, he listened. He was listening very closely. But think about it, right? And yet, who is being rewarded with distribution on social media? The liars, the people who lie. Right? Because 6 times faster, and I would wager that when Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it to X, that it got even worse. And then here's the other part that's shocking to me, and I know, thank you, Meta, TikTok, for funding fact-checking. But, I mean, frankly, you just wanted distance from actually doing the work yourself. We're frenemies.
You sort of nicked my next question, because I was coming to responsibility, right? Responsibility, and certainly in this room, and society in general, is our awkward interaction with the tech platforms, as you say, our funders, but at the same time.
Thank you for funding us.
At the same time, certainly in your mind, I mean. Some of the language you've used around Mark Zuckerberg's responsibility, personal responsibility, for the things that you have seen, certainly in the Philippines and elsewhere, is strong. So how do we reconcile that? I mean, Rappler remains a member of the third-party fact-checking project. I shouldn't think Meta has any kind of client, partner, whatever, that gets quite the amount of shit they get from you.
Well,
so how does that work? How does it work? Why are you still there? Why are you still in the third party?
So first, I'm being, not to be facetious, but truly, I stepped away from the editorial arm of Rappler after I kept getting all of the lawsuits and the attacks on social media, because being a journalist means you're handcuffed, right? You're not going to curse. I'm not going to curse. At people who are lying, at the power. Never underestimate the power of arrogance and ignorance, especially if the algorithms favor them, right? So for me, starting in 2020, I moved away. So Meta does not deal with me in terms of our fact-checking program. You have Gemma Mendoza, who is here, who is their partner. I am, really, I try very hard not to let what I say impact Rappler. Please, Meta, don't let it impact Rappler or TikTok. I mean, I do have a story about TikTok that shows you kind of the difference in world change. But look, I wrote a book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. It was just translated to Georgian, and it's so interesting. The translation is one of the most aggressive. It's how to defeat a dictator. I said how to stand up. We weren't sure yet we were going to win, but Georgians wanted to be defeated, right? So that was interesting. But in my book, I talked about two dictators, Mark Zuckerberg and Duterte. And really, frankly, Rodrigo Duterte is out of office. But the bigger dictator is Mark Zuckerberg. And part of it is because he's not an elected official. And yet he, along with Elon Musk, what has Elon Musk done to Twitter? I can't even call it X yet. I was on the stage right after him in Cannes. And he has a vision for news and facts that talks about the wisdom of crowds. But I did challenge that because the wisdom of crowds requires trust, which is completely off. There are 5 things. Wisdom of Crowds is a book by James Suriecki, and I think X now only has 2 of the 5, which is people were there, right? So what next? You can't have the wisdom of crowds. What you're seeing on social media is a mob, and a mob creates a chilling effect. A mob changes reality. To the sponsors, I will appeal to you the way ASEAN appealed to the dictators, and we know it had limited success, but I really hope you look at the world today and look at constructive engagement, right? That you are the only ones with the power and the money to literally do something right now to protect democracy, to prevent genocide. And I'll go back to 2018, which is when, in Myanmar, in my part of the world, both the UN and Meta sent investigative teams to Myanmar. And they both came out with the same result, which is that Facebook had enabled genocide. Why has nothing been done? Every day of inaction causes harm. You don't have to take responsibility for it. We will, because we want it to change.
Maria, I want to come back to this.
Sorry, not to put Facebook on the spot, right? But I'm sure we will speak. There's a lot of things we say privately. We really are frenemies, but now, please again, to go back to that moment, the window is closing. And what I'm worried about is that you say you don't have the incentive to fix it. We're not asking you to fix it. We're asking you to just put in place little measures that you put in place in 2020 when you turned the news ecosystem quality towards facts. And it worked. And when you stopped block invitations in Facebook groups, right? That's a critical one because when you block invite, they realized they had a break glass measure where after the 2020 elections in the United States, they put friction in the mix. They made every person joining a group have to be admitted by the administrator. And that little thing was actually very useful because when they took it off, and they took it off shortly after the 2020 US elections, it helped the growth of Stop the Steal, a new Facebook group. It grew to 360,000 a day, right? So we can please do those little measures now when it matters.
Bria, I want to come back to this question of integrity of facts.
Oh, wow, yes.
Integrity of facts, which again is at the heart of the issue where we're at. Sometimes it's a sort of surreal conversation.
Yes.
It's something that most people in this audience battle with every day.
Thank you.
It's something that's often not appreciated, I think, by mainstream media. It's something that's often politicized, hence the move to the almost surreal use of the word censorship when you're just trying to get to
From
the
our
facts.
statement that Angie read, right?
How do we get towards, it seems almost hopeless at this point in time, the sort of competing narratives. How do we get towards some sort of integrity of facts?
So first of all, we have to embrace that everything is political, right? And for journalists, AFP, it has journalists in Gaza, it becomes like this, we cannot say what we see and what we mean now without a chilling effect. So folks, welcome to our world in the Philippines under Duterte, right? Americans have an idea that they have free speech, but I gave the Harvard commencement speech, and unless you're willing to be attacked by both sides or any side, you don't speak. So that is alarming. Information integrity. So a big picture, a macro way is that thank you, Brazil, for Brazil is the leader of the G20 dialogues, and it has put information integrity as part of the G20 agenda. And we had G20 dialogues in Brazil itself. Why is Brazil so critical of this? Because like the Philippines, they moved from hell to purgatory. They went from Bolsonaro to Lula, right? But the interesting thing here is information integrity, the core of what we do as fact checkers, changes reality, right? And let's go to this one idea that is embedded in every tech company, especially ad tech, right? Where they say, look, personalization is the be all and end all. We will personalize everything for you. I mean, when this came out on Twitter in 2013, 2014,
yeah,
I was like, really? Personalization? Well, okay, yeah. But I never thought that this, in 2014, if you click on a sneaker, you'll be followed by sneakers for 2 weeks. But today, personalization, the tech has gotten so good that personalization means every single person in this audience can have their own personalized reality, right? You can have your own reality with your belief systems, with your cognitive biases kicked in. You're not gonna listen to facts in your own personalized reality. A world where all of us have our own personalized reality in this room would be called an insane asylum. Really, we cannot have our own personalized realities. If you don't have facts, I mean, this I've said over and over, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these three, we have no shared reality. You can't begin to solve any problem. We cannot have journalism or democracy or solve, that big thing that we're all facing, climate change. It's existential. So if we don't do something right now, the world will tip towards, and I'll use Madeleine Albright's word, fascism. When it moves to fascism, would you trust your dictator to be better than the chaotic role of a democracy? Democracies aren't perfect. They never have been. But in the world's experiments with systems of governance, they have given us all a voice. Now, technology, we haven't talked, sorry, let me just throw in generative AI.
I was just about to come in.
Shut up.
Yeah, that was my, because,
Sorry.
right. So this, your dystopian vision.
Oh, please,
I
we
know,
gotta fix it.
It's terrible to say Maria has a dystopian vision because she's one of the most positive people you'll ever meet. But the point here is really, before we've really looked at what generative AI brings to the table in terms of disinformation and in terms of the information ecosystem, right?
Yes.
It feels like we're standing on the precipice at this point, right? How are we, fact-checking community, journalism community, supposed to interact with the AI companies knowing that we really haven't resolved the issues that we had with the tech platforms previously, well, not resolved the issues, you've just enunciated the issues that we still have, as it were.
Yeah, yeah.
What are we supposed to do?
So it's going to get worse. We already know this, right? Like you've already seen generative AI. I have several generative AI that sound like me, that look like me. I'm selling crypto that was seeded by a Russian scam network, and I'm trying to figure out whether that's connected to politics, right? So if you see me selling crypto, don't believe it. But you know, some CEOs and CFOs in the Philippines called me asking me about the crypto. So what is it? Cory Doctorow coined the term, the enshittification of the internet. It's in full steam. As of January this year, 57.1%, this is an academic paper, and I'll tweet it, but I'll exit. Anyway, 57.1% of the internet is now low quality content, right? So if the lies don't push you out of the public information ecosystem, if the hate doesn't push you out of the public information ecosystem, the enshittification will. And that's part of what we are going to deal with today, right? We need to you need to be the foot soldiers, to keep checking the facts, because what we did in the Philippines in our May 2022 elections, and Google News Initiative was our partner, Midan was our platform that took 150 different organizations, and we built a 4-layer whole of society approach for facts. Because, you know, 16 news organizations fact-checking. The second layer, we called it the mesh, the distribution layer, because our biggest problem is going to be the distribution, right? So the distribution layer were 116 different civil society groups, NGOs, human rights groups were in, artists joined us, the church joined us, business finally joined us. We need business in the loop. That layer is critical. I'll come back to it. The third layer were academics. So Midan had helped take all of the data which we processed for the academics in the third layer. Every week they came out with, they did a webinar where they showed these are the lies being spread, these are the candidates that are benefiting or not or being attacked. The fourth layer is the critical one. Law groups, legal groups, left, right, and center, because they spent in 3 months, they filed more than 21 cases to protect the 4-layer pyramid. You know, when we came out with this in the Philippines, and you know, again, I have to thank our partners in doing this, because the Solicitor General of the Philippines immediately filed a case at the Supreme Court calling fact-checking prior restraint. They were trying to make fact-checking illegal. It took months, but the Supreme Court threw it out. And you know what? Somebody's going to have to stand up and take the blow. So I happily did, right? I mean, what's one more case at that point? But I guess, why is that important? Because the fact-checking was the foundation. The fact-checking was the foundation of reality. Sorry, let me answer your question. What are we going to walk into? What I hope to do now is, before I answer that, I see all the other, let me do equal opportunity, like weakness points and appeals, because I appealed to Meta. Let me talk to YouTube, who's also, because they're also a sponsor. I'm just looking at the sponsors. Again, thank you for everything you've done in the past, but you can do more. YouTube was fantastic on Ukraine, right? They pivoted very quickly and took down the lies. Are they as good on Gaza? And YouTube and TikTok, let me do an example. I think my NDA already expired. But during the 2022 elections in the Philippines, you know, we came out, like many of you do, with the spreadsheets of thousands of liars that are creating disinformation networks, and their video, because video is it, right? And we gave this, it's thousands. We gave it to both TikTok and YouTube. TikTok took 98% down in 36 hours. I'm not completely on your side, TikTok. You have a lot of work to do also. YouTube took a longer time before they did. And the reason, and when I brought it up to YouTube, I just said, TikTok already took them down. And they were like, yeah, but they're China. Not to, because I know ByteDance is also an American group. But again, please, there is no room to duck, right? I said this to Rappler when we got the shutdown case. This is the moment when every person in every one of the tech companies and everyone here, give me 2 seconds.
Take your time, Maria.
Sorry.
Take your time.
My journalist friends get upset when I get emotional. Journalists have no feelings. I think this is the moment, and this is what I told Rappler when we got the shutdown order. This is going to be the moment where a decade from now, you're going to want to look back and know you did everything you could. Everything. Because the world will be transformed. Oh my God.
Let's move to just something calmer, which I think is, we've spoken here a lot about the ecosystem, the moment we're at. I think you've been incredibly eloquent about the moment we're at, the need for action. I get to bring in here the issue around regulation. You've been saying for a long time, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act in the States. You worked a lot on helping to get the Digital Services Act. The discussions on AI legislation at the moment are sort of in their infancy. You always feel we're running behind, as it were.
Yeah.
Is this something that we can feel confident about? The DSA, surely, at this point, is a test, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The legislation is down. They've seen what happened in Gaza. You just took one look at X during the Gaza, crisis, whatever. The moment is now, right?
Yes.
What's going to happen now? What's the follow-up? What's going to happen now?
So I think first, there's so many layers in this, right? You have to understand, I know that fact checkers, we were created by the tech companies. So I appeal to the tech companies to continue the funding for fact checkers. There's a big debate among journalists, and this was the debate I had in Georgia. Should journalists take money from tech? If you're running a news organization, that's not a debate at all. It's academics who aren't in the battle itself. But look, I feel as a fact checker, our people are there, and we ask, that's a completely, frankly, if you think about it, fact checking is part of journalism, but the distribution system has separated this, right? So we need to make sure facts are there, that the world is anchored in facts. That's the first. The world still thinks that everything is about content. Our biggest battle in the EU was really to separate content from data, the transparency of data, the algorithms, and the tech design itself, right? You have to tell people, while you are in the trenches putting out the facts, most everything, more important, I think, to me, than actually the content, because I don't care if my crazy neighbor says something that is crazy. It isn't censorship, and it isn't about free speech being stifled. It's about what gets the widest distribution, right? My crazy neighbor who believes ducks can talk should not be the front page. And often what happens now is the most outrageous lies, the most incendiary content are the ones that get the front page. And when I say front page in today's day and age, the widest distribution. So we go back to the design of the companies. You can make a fraction less money to preserve the reality of the world, right? And I say it as a business owner and a business head who's actually spent a lot more in legal fees to protect the public information ecosystem. That's the second. So we have to, beyond the actual work that we do, where are the news groups, you know, in terms of collective action, both for governments and for our public? The Writers Guild Association, after generative AI came out, they came up and acted collectively. We news heads, we're not acting collectively on anything, because I think we still have the vestigial tail. We still think we have power. We're the first in battle. We had a really nice discussion this morning, because in the end, it's about the business model. It is about power and money. We are continuing to do our jobs as journalists. It's kind of like the dam is already falling, and we're putting our finger in the dam to hold it up. But we have to find a sustainable business model. We have to stop the breakdown of trust, which the tech companies, the platforms continue to erode, because they can make more money at it. So how do you fix it? Legislation, right?
The least. Where ultimately is the money going to come from, right? For media, for fact checkers, forever. I mean, you know, there's points of crisis. We see collapse in referral traffic from Google, from Meta to business sites.
Yeah, we haven't talked about how I think digital news will die in less than a year.
Right. So
Sorry,
where
we'll talk about it.
So where is that money going to come from?
Yeah. We're doing knee-jerk reactions when, you know, I think about the information ecosystem as a polluted river. So here's this river, and what we tend to do is we take a glass of water from the river, we clean it up, and then we throw it back into the river, right? We have to go up to the pollution from the factory of lies and shut that down. So the answer to your question is, in the long term, it is education, right? It's education on AI in elementary schools all the way to policymakers. It is education in what journalism is, because it isn't, so education, medium term, legislation. The legislation, the AI Act doesn't take effect for another 2 years. And yet, we are Pavlov's dogs. We are actually, and you know, if you are from the Global South, if you are a woman or LGBTQ+, in the Global South, we've been colonized twice now. Chris Wiley, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, was the first to say this. He said, colonialism didn't die, it moved online. And that code that came to us in the Global South, that didn't have our culture, our language, our customs, it didn't have any of that, and yet it was an overlay on how we were. So colonization, but the second one is, we're the ones who actually are in those factories cleaning it up for the tech companies the first time. But the second time on generative AI, it's the Global South that is cleaning up the tech so that you can use it in the Global North. Medium-term legislation. Right now, the legislation, the DSA, the DMA, the companies just leapfrogged over it, right? And yes, it's making some small headway, but it isn't enough. And that's part of the reason we need the companies with us. It's part of the reason I'm here. And while I do say, you know these problems, we know it, and the public, our task is actually to make sure the public knows and understands that your business decisions for profit, surveillance for profit, brings with it harms that governments are going to have to deal with, that the people are going to have to deal with, right? So there's that. We will continue doing that in the medium term. In the short term, it is just us, which is why we did this 4-layer pyramid. It's an influencer marketing campaign for facts. Think about it like that, right? But it's gotten worse. So what else are we going to do? Collaborate, 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 right? This is a brave new world, worse than 1984, because we're just in the process of turning into the upside down. I always prepare for worst case scenarios. And I keep thinking, okay, post-2024, what if democracy dies? What will we do? The battle doesn't end. It just becomes harder, and it starts for decades. That's why, while the window is still open today, our tech partners, join us in this, because it will not leave you and your children alone. It will come for you. This is our collective battle. So in the short term, if you have a cell phone, you're with us. The question is, are you going to fight the battle smartly? Are you going to fight it collaboratively? Are you going to build a better world for your children?
Maria, I think a lot of people in the audience, fact checkers are often really in the line of fire.
Always.
Even within AFP, the people who work on fact checking get way more harassment just than our regular journalists. Things that become banal, the death threats, the whatever it may be. You've really been in the eye of that storm for a long time. What advice can you give to this community that's been, many of them who are suffering? How do you get through it? How do you manage the levels of hate, threat, and so on that you've had to deal with now for a decade? Right?
So first, know you are not alone. When I was getting the worst of it, we had a senator who once said she eats death threats for breakfast. We have death threats all the time, and from 2016, in the first 6 months when we were getting attacked on, it was largely Facebook at that point, we had to increase security 6 times in a year and a half, right? So now I'm also, let me say this, right? What you are feeling, what you are going through, you're not alone. And if we collaborate and bring that together, then we can do better, right? That's the first. I think the second thing is that it is normal to be afraid. It's normal to be afraid. But that's also another reason why collaboration becomes critical. Having said that, the people in the room with you, when you make a critical decision, you also want to make sure that that anyone who is, let me phrase it another way, courage spreads. And part of what we found in Rappler is I had a core team of the 4 founders who we knew we were under attack. I knew I could go to jail. I knew I was wearing a bulletproof vest in when I'm in Manila, right? So, and yet, it's gallows humor. Sorry, I won't even use gallows. You find a way out of it by holding the line. And what did we do? We decided that only one of the 4 of us can be afraid at a time. You have to pass the fear, right? So
literally, how does that work?
Like literally,
there's
a squeegee that you pass the fear, right? Like, and part of it is because you're leading a team. You don't want the fear cascading. And the other part is if you're a leader, anytime you're not clear, it's harder for your team. Their fear grows. So pass the fear, have a team of trusted people. And what gives you courage? Your shared values. Your shared values, because this is the moment, right? Like literally we decided that when we look back a decade from now, we're gonna know we did everything we could. So pass the fear, arm your people with knowledge. Know that that they're going to be attacked. And what we did at the beginning was we did something called the swarm. And frankly, we could do this together and we would be far more effective. If you're the one under attack, it doesn't help for you to defend yourself because it's exponential. Right? Like, what am I going to do? Like, at one point, I went to Facebook. I said, I'm getting 90 hate messages per hour on this. And they were like, yeah, but you're a public figure. You should respond. There's more than 24 hours in a day, is there? 90 hate messages per hour. I couldn't even physically respond. So these are some of the things. What we did is the person being attacked sits back and everyone else swarms. Just that alone, we didn't do it with bots, by the way. That was the other thing. Someone told me, you know, Maria, with everything you're doing in tech, you could have used bots. I was like, it's deceptive. It's unethical. You know, I don't know how else to say that even louder. Sorry. So standards and ethics are both our mantra and our armor. So what else can we do? We're not punching bags. We are, please, no learned helplessness, because that's the other thing that happens. Understand that as the tech companies are rebuilding the world, we can too. We rebuild it. We build it to be what we want, right? And this world is toxic sludge injected into your bloodstream. That's not what I want. Right? So last, I'll just say on a big picture thing, because don't get lost in the nuts and bolts of where they bring everything. There are three big things we need to keep in mind. And these were the demands in the 10-point action plan that Dmitry Muratov and I rolled out in April 2022. The first, stop surveillance for profit. Surveillance for profit, surveillance capitalism, right? On Facebook, the Consumer Reports just said that on every account on Facebook has at least 2,300 separate different data points. 2,300. And then these companies take our data and build a model of us that knows us better than we know ourselves. Get rid of the word model, because these euphemisms take it away from what it really is. Use the word clone. They clone us, and then artificial intelligence the first time takes all of our clones, and that becomes the motherlode database for micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is not the old advertising. Micro-targeting is taking your weakest moment to a message and selling it to a company or a country. So stop surveillance for profit. The second, stop coded bias. Because if you are a woman, LGBTQ+, if you are brown or black, if you are marginalized in the real world, you are marginalized even more online. That's the second point. Gender disinformation, these recidivist networks that attack women, are literally pounding women to silence, and many more. Aside from journalists and activists, women politicians are opting out of public life. Mia Sandu in Moldova is under intense information warfare. Russian. In Georgia, you have women who are being attacked by both Russian disinformation and Chinese disinformation, right? The playbook is going around. All right, so stop coded bias. Third, because all of this, these two things lead to information warfare, which is pounding to silence. The third, journalism as an antidote to tyranny. Because not everyone is created equal on social media, right? What happened to the experts? What happened to the standards and ethics? You know, it's funny because Elon Musk was talking about wisdom of the crowds that turned into a mob. But I think what we're living in now is the cult of the amateur. Let's elevate voices as journalists, right? Anyway, sorry, I'll shut up. I can talk forever, but please just know you're critical, because you have to tell your family and friends. We need to move from the virtual world to the real world. We need to talk to our partners in every one of the tech companies and appeal to their consciences.
Maria, we could go on. I think I've got through about a third of my questions, but we could go on. But I'd love to throw, I just want to actually finish also just by saying, which is always comes back to me when I speak to you, this point that, as you keep saying, it can get better.
Oh, yeah.
You are I love your hell to purgatory thing. I've never been to purgatory, but it figures
hell.
it's better than hell, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, that's incredibly inspiring. So I'd love to, we've got about 7 to 8 minutes. I think there's a microphone somewhere, I'm told.
Sorry, can I add one
Yes.
last thing? But please get the microphone to the questions, because I'd love to answer your questions. The last thing is that, you know, big tech is also helping us build, right? Because in the end, the solution for all of us is not just content, it's tech. So we need to build deliberative technology. And, you know, again, kudos to the companies that have helped us. We are now building something called the Matrix Protocol chat app. The Matrix Protocol is an end-to-end encrypted, decentralized system that is used by France and Germany. God help them in their elections. We've connected it to the login of a news organization so that you get rid of all of the, you know, the DNS servers, all of that stuff that a Mastodon will ask for. We've rolled this out December last year around Christmas time, and we are getting ready for the 2025 elections in the Philippines. Please take a look at it because it is safe. I'm making the bet that the enshittification of the internet is going to be so bad that people who want information for their vote, who want information about where the flooding is happening, who want information, are going to come to our app in the Philippines. We're rolling it out to anyone who is interested. I think it's that kind of moment. And I thank, again, the tech companies who have supported us through this. We're frenemies.
Thanks, Maria. Questions? There's a lady in the middle. I think the microphone's coming.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring. You are always combining optimism with action. Rawan Daman from Arij, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism and Arab Fact Checkers Network. You know you are a role model in our region, and it's great to have you. I'm very glad that you mentioned Gaza. Unfortunately, we have just launched a Gaza project with AFP that documented that fact checkers and journalists have been targeted by Israel, not by coincidence. It's a trend. Even AFP office was targeted. So your message to fact checkers and journalists was not only, you know, combating disinformation through working with the regional and international fact checkers on this, but are also fighting for their lives in zero safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Please ask, I will say one thing, right? Like on this, this isn't just fact checkers, journalists. I think the biggest casualty right now and what the world needs to prove to us. So I've been talking about the tech companies. Let's talk about governments, right? The biggest problem is that the question now at the table is whether or not a Putin or a Netanyahu, whether the international rules-based order still exists, right? That's a question on a macro level that the world is facing, and it doesn't help that the tech makes it so hard to get to the facts. It used to be much easier before, but I will say, you know, as Americans go to the polls, and this is critical because Gaza is such a fracture line of American society that connects every single fracture line. It connects, you know, gender, race, it's all there. And, you know, the role of Russian disinformation was never to make you believe one thing. It was, in Black Lives Matter in 2016, they were attacking both sides. The goal is chaos, right? The goal is to make everyone so cynical that they do not believe anything. Because a pliant citizen is an inactive citizen who just goes and drinks and says, I don't believe anything. Yeah. Do not let it get there.
The gentleman down the front. Yeah.
Hi, Maria. Andy Carvin, DFR Lab.
Hi, Andy.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
Your courage is infectious, and there's no other word for it. And I've got to say, over the years, when things have started feeling heavier than usual, Holding the line has been an inspiration each morning to keep the work going and keeping the teams going. But I keep asking myself, how can we take our collective courage and bring that back to the funding community so they understand that we can't do this work without them? I see organizations like Stanford Internet Institute collapsing under pressure.
Yeah.
Colleagues around the world struggling to keep the lights on. What is the message that we really need to be bringing to funders, not even just the tech sector, but civil society more broadly, to show that we're running out of time here? And if we don't figure this out literally in the months ahead, there may not be another opportunity to do so.
Yeah, Andy, this was actually our very
our breakfast conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our cheerful breakfast conversation. I think it comes to two ways. I think the first is, you know, we need to create a mechanism where we can more actively collaborate with each other. And given the way the information ecosystem works, amplify each other, right? We should be able to do this. This is so old 2016 times, right? That's the first. But then the second one is, you know, countries are the ones literally like fiddling like Nero while Rome is burning, because there's a great book coming out in September by a former member of parliament, the EU Parliament, Marichka Saki. She calls it the tech coup. And you know, it's the fact that Elon Musk can make a decision and decide that the attack from Ukraine is not going to happen on Russia, right? Like a lot of the powers that used to be with governments are no longer with government. And every day that they do not put these guardrails in place means democratic governments get weaker. So as we are seeing, it is shifting. And you know, we haven't even talked about whether Chinese AI is better than Western AI. And you know, I would posit that China has more safety measures in place around its generative AI and around its technology than the Western version, right? You know, TikTok, for example, has two different codes, one for China and one that it exports to the rest of the world. The one in China has, for every kid 14 years and below, has a time limit for how long they can be on TikTok because it's addictive. And also has educational videos for their kids. But the one they export, so Tristan Harris will say, this is our spinach version for China, and then the cocaine version is exported to the rest of us. When you're addicted, you become we are very weak addicted, right? So to answer your question, I think the first is, please look at your world today, just like we do at Rappler every day. And you know, what is it? Don't just do what you need to do. You're gonna say you have a list of 10 fact checks you need to do, right? Don't just look at that, but look at the systems you're doing, the partners you're working with. Can we do something better? I think that's the first, because the innovation comes from the ideas of people in the trenches. The reason why we began building the Matrix Protocol chat app 2 years ago was we saw Meta choking traffic to news. Meta, please don't choke traffic to news groups. We will be helpful to you, I promise. But the second one is, so that's now global, right? In January 2023, it was a drop of 50% to 85%. The Western news groups bore the brunt of it in traffic. And then generative AI came on, and what happens? Google built its AI, the search generative experience, on top of search. So while it says that you can actually opt out of this, you can't, because if you do, you disappear from search. There are only 3 ways that a website gets traffic: direct, social, or search. So as people go to the polls, there's going to be less news, less facts in their social feeds. And again, I'm looking at America because who knows what will happen, but it can be a tipping point by November, right? Like what happens? 4 in 10 Americans get their news from social media. 4 in 10. And the younger generation, oh, they are all living on social media, right? So, sorry, I'm not answering your question. So the
Wait,
first,
yeah, where's the money coming from, Maria? Where's the money coming from?
you can see, right? So let me talk about Rappler's experience. What we did was we diversified. So in January 2018, when there were calls made after the government tried to shut us down, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue in 2018. Rappler's about 120 people. Our median age is 23 years old, 63% women, right? We should have shut down in 2018. But then what did it force us to do? We looked at everything we were doing, and we saw, wow, the way we figured out as journalists how to find networks of disinformation and how to use natural language processing to look at the clustering of messages, this is something other companies need. So we splintered it off, and that became, so what happened when the COVID lockdown happened? Well, not only did we survive, but we started that in 2018, and today it provides about 50% of Rappler's revenues. Everyone will tell you, the tech companies at the forefront will say, diversify your revenue stream. But if you're a small group, it's very hard to do that. So how do you diversify? You partner. You partner. So for us, we were prepared for the COVID lockdown, and we're the only news group in the Philippines that hasn't laid people off. The laying off of journalists globally is alarming, right? On YouTube, only 2% are news organizations of all of the videos there. And let's dive into that 2%. Only 58% have standards and ethics. They're the news organization. I'm giving you all the stats for negative things. All right, so the first, look around you, look at what you can do, look at how you can repurpose, look at how you can collaborate. And then the second one, we got to try it now. I wish I could give you $50 million. I'll tell you one thing that we did do when we saw news organizations dying, especially in the Global South. In 2019, we began something called the International Fund for Public Interest Media. And we raised last year $50 million from governments who, it's like 0.3% is given to independent media all around the world of the Overseas Development Assistance Funds. So we have this $50 million because oftentimes news organizations don't want to take money from governments, the same way governments don't want to give money to news organizations because they think that that's pressure, right? So if PIM is now giving grants, unrestricted grants to news groups in the Global South as an interim period, and that's part of where I spend my time to raise money for the survival of news organizations.
Maria, I'm going to be in trouble. They're flashing my
Okay.
big red time's up. I'm sorry, there's no more time for questions, but I'd really like to thank Maria for coming here and for
Thank
sharing.
you for what you do. Thank you.